Hi, I'm Owen Canfield with the opinion page here at the Oklahoman, and I'm joined by Mike McNutt, our Capitol correspondent, to talk, as we do every Friday morning, about the week that was at the Capitol. One issue of importance, of course, is the budget. You had a story earlier this week, Mike, that the governor basically said, no, the deal that you guys have hashed out, or the plan, not really on board with all of it, so go back and keep working. And that's where it stands with what they hope will be 2 weeks left in the session. What are the prospects for a budget agreement to be worked out and to get things adjourned a week early as they hope to do this session?
Well, right now, as you say, the governor kicked back the proposal to the House and Senate leaders. They're taking a look at it, and the important thing is they're talking.
Right.
And as long as both sides are talking, there is progress being made. They'll continue to talk today. There'll be discussions with the Speaker and the Governor, and I think the President Pro Tem is going to be involved a little bit too, and probably over the weekend, as they look at the numbers. And there's some, we don't know, there's a confidentiality agreement between all sides, so
right.
They can't release, understandably, because if one side leaks, then of course the other side does. And
sure.
So we don't know the exact things, but there's some differences, and they're trying to work those out. And of course, they all agree that there's less money this year, this coming fiscal year, than there is this present fiscal year. Apparently, when you take all the stimulus money back in, we were down $600 million short of state revenues. They're hoping that with enough federal stimulus money, we're $300 million below.
Right.
So you have to make some cuts, and so that's the big decision. Where do you make the cuts?
Well, you mentioned that they're talking. The tone of your story the other day in the paper, it left me with the impression that there wasn't any screaming going on back and forth. It was both sides saying, yeah, well, we're still a ways apart, but we can work this out, as opposed to the sort of the hardline stances that you can see in some budget years. Apparently, it's a fairly amiable or amicable talks that are going on.
Yeah, that's the impression we get, is that they are talking. Like you said, previous years we've had some, here's my proposal, take it or leave it.
Right.
None of that yet so far, and of course, the longer and that deadline looms, of course, patience could wear off. But I think all the negotiators involved are pretty level-headed. Senator Johnson from Kingfisher, Representative Biller from Edmond,
right,
and the governor and Scott Meacham, the treasurer. They've been through this before, and they know pretty much. They don't get too excited about deadlines. And there's a little posturing going on. The first time the governor's working with two Republican heads in the House and the Senate. And but to answer your question, the House and Senate leaders are optimistic they can get this done. They say they can. If they can get a budget agreement by Wednesday,
middle of next week,
the week of the 22nd,
the week
so
of
that'd be like the 20th.
Right. Wow.
Now, I think that's kind of a stretch, but they know more than I about how they can get those bills through. And that's the thing. Once they get it through, they can start the process.
Sure.
Of course, they like to get a little bit more notice for their members so they can read it over and have a better idea what they're voting on.
What a novel idea.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of here it is, vote on it. So we'll see. Probably have a better idea week from today what's going on.
Speaking of money, this is in a broader scale. There was an issue out at the Capitol about state sovereignty, about states, about a move to get the federal government off the states back, in reference to the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, right. And that has to do with money to some degree. They don't want the federal government to tell them how to do this, how to do that. Talk a little bit about what that movement's all about and where that stands right now. I know there was an issue. You wrote about it this week.
Yeah. Well, it's basically a growing sentiment, going back at least 10 years.
Primarily a conservative,
8 years.
Conservative
movement
right.
Saying that the federal government is just getting more and more involved in not only state government, but in people's lives.
Sure.
The Patriot Act, some people were concerned that it was just taking too much personal identity. Right. And we've seen during the Bush administration, even Republicans are saying that this is stretching a little bit further into individual rights and states' rights. And we've seen they say that the No Child Left Behind Act has unfunded mandate for schools. Right. The federal government telling local school districts what to do. So this has been kind of growing. Last year, Representative Key had an amendment to a resolution to say, look, the 10th Amendment says, here's what the federal government's supposed to do. About 20 basic things in the U.S. Constitution. Abide by that. Everything else, the states are supposed to do. Right. It didn't pass in the House, but since then, of course, we've seen the federal economic stimulus funds, the teapot parties, and people just thinking that federal government is getting more and more involved in their lives. So this resolution passed rather handily both in the House and the Senate. The original resolution, the governor vetoed because he felt that there's a lot of constitutional issues, and
he was
is
concerned about losing stimulus money as well.
Exactly. I mean, if you're going to say you don't want the federal government getting involved in state governments, then look how much money we get from the federal government.
Sure.
So governor vetoed that resolution. The House earlier this week decided, well, we don't need a joint resolution. We'll just do a concurrent resolution, which doesn't need the governor's signature. So the House passed it again. It's in the Senate. It probably will pass next week. And again, the Representative Charles Key, Republican from Oklahoma City, has been besieged by people since stories came out, and Matt Drudge put it on his website,
I heard that.
And hundreds of thousands of people, are reading the thing.
Sure.
So he'll be on Mike Huckabee's show tomorrow on Fox. So it's picking up not just in Oklahoma, but across the country. There's a sentiment that, as you mentioned, the federal government may just be. There's a belief that the federal government's too involved.
Enough already with the federal government, right? Speaking of sort of hot button issues, 10 Commandments has been an issue at the legislature the last couple of years. Looks like there will be a 10 Commandments monument erected on the state capitol, paid for with private funds. But that's all been, that's cleared all the hurdles, am I right?
Well, it goes back to the Senate.
Okay.
But when it came to the House yesterday, it passed only 2 voted against it, so 89-2. And it goes to the Senate where it passed unanimously and probably will pass handily in the Senate. Speculation is the governor will go ahead and approve it because who can vote against the 10 Commandments? And then let that's what we'll see what happens. If they've erected, it's supposed to be a 6-foot tall monolith pattern after a similar statue in Texas, which has survived a Supreme Court challenge, U.S. Supreme Court challenge on separation of church and state. So they've used the same words. It's going to be exactly the same. It's going to be paid for with private funds. A group is going to help if the Attorney General needs some help with the defense. If there's a challenge filed, the group has been identified to help with that. So yeah, it looks like pass the House, pass the Senate, and then the governor will get to it, and we'll see what he does with it. But if he signs off on it, looks like probably in a year or two there'll be a 10 Commandments statue somewhere in the Capitol grounds, and of course the Capitol grounds is pretty good territory.
Sure.
I mean, it stretches out quite a few blocks, so we'll see where that ends up.
Well, I think some folks look at that as an issue of, there's got to be more important things that the state government should be working on than this. It's taken up a lot of time and effort, and it looks like soon it'll be behind us, and that'll be that. But anyway, Mike, thank you as always. Another busy week at the Capitol. We only touch on a few of the things every week. There's always a ton out there. Mike does a great job reporting on it for the Oklahoman and here on News OK. We ask you to keep reading the paper every day and to check us here on News OK TV.